No. Just
All right, I have 10 o'clock. I'm going to call the Isabella County Board of Commissioners Finance and Administration Committee meeting to order. This is a hybrid meeting, which means it's both in person and electronic. I'm going to call the order. I just did that. Approval of the agenda. Commissioners have anything that you'd like to see on the agenda? Added, subtracted, taken off? Yeah. I see nothing, so we'll move on to call to the public. I'm going to turn around and call the public. We have a very heavily populated attendance today, but no one seems to want to come up and speak. So we'll turn to the virtual. Any virtual today?
No, there is not. Mr.
Oh, they
Chairman.
just don't know what they're missing on this beautiful day today. So we'll close the call to the public and the issue of time and move on to consider scheduling the public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget. Nicole, I think I've seen this before, but why don't if you want to just say anything on it, go ahead.
Absolutely, sir. Normally this comes right to full board, but we're just bringing it through finance this time, making sure everything is set for the public hearing. As you know, it's been moved up a little bit, and that will be held September 6th. That's always at your regular meeting, and hopefully budget adoption will occur 2 weeks later at your next regular meeting.
Okay. Commissioners have any issues with this? Okay, Jerry, you want to make a motion on this?
Yes, I'll move, considering the scheduling of the public hearing of the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget beginning at 7 p.m. For the Tuesday, September 6th, 2022, at hybrid meeting for the work session.
I'll support that. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Pose the same. It will move forward to the next board meeting. Next up, fiscal year 2023 requested budget draft number 4 update.
Yes, so you guys have, and Melissa, do they have in front of them the
Yes, we-
draft and the proposed changes?
I am Melissa right now. Yes, Melissa said yes.
Excellent. So I think what I will start with sharing, sorry, things are a little clunky for me here this morning. I'm going to start with what's changed from the last draft that we brought forward to finance. I realize you have the draft in front of you, but I think it's going to be more meaningful to go over the changes before we look at the whole numbers, maybe. So in July, when we brought the last draft forward, we were still at a deficit of just over 830,000. Remember when we started this with the requested, we were at 4.6. Then I think we brought back a draft that we got down to 1.1. We are working so hard to find things. What you're going to see in that draft number 4, if it's laying right there in front of you, we're still at $500,000 from closing that gap. And we'll talk about some options to maybe close that gap after we go through this. So since the last draft, that 832 deficit, how did we get down to closer to the 500,000 that you see before you? Adjustments to revenue, looking at the personnel requests that were made in the fiscal 23 budget, I am not moving forward any of the reclassification requests because of the company that I reached out to help us with those reclassifications. Our policy says we'll send those out to a third party. The third party is not interested in working with our current classification structure. And I really had a hard time trying to work through it myself. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you see on here, I'm building in ARPA revenue perhaps for a wage study, and maybe classification study is a little better adjective to use for that. I realize probably another wage study would would result in even more wages that we can't sustain through time. But it's that structure, it's the classification piece. We've got assistants making more than chief deputy type of things in certain offices that weren't like public defender's office, right? They weren't part of the study, the structure that they're in now. You've got people in that should be higher up on the classification structure that are making less than those under them. Other classification reclassification requests in the fiscal 23 requested budget we looked at, and at first I thought maybe they were treated differently in the study, but as I follow it through, I can't really see how they were. Again, it's something we need a third party for. So in my recommended budget, you will not see me approving any reclassifications. Do I support those departments and maybe looking at those jobs? Absolutely, I do. And that's why the recommended budget is also going to include that we go out for another classification study. Obviously, we're going to have a lot more conversation before we do something like that, not just in the budget, but if we actually hire a company to do that. But I do not believe these reclassifications should be subject to who sits in the administrator controller position. They should be sent to outside third party. And right now that's just not possible. So that's my solution. So that was a long intro to what I am recommending are similar to what you approved recently for community development department, the restructure requests where they say, look, they really look at the department. They say not necessarily, oh, this position needs to be higher, reclassed higher, but they recognize this is what my department needs. And Director Griffiths in emergency management has looked at his emergency management department. We've known from his reports and the grants that planner position is going away, essentially not being funded by that EMPG anymore. What a restructure would do if that planner position goes away in the future. Director Griffiths is willing to give up that admin assistant that was shared between emergency management and 911. The position is not currently filled. The position was approved, but has never been able to be filled. So there is money budgeted for that. So between giving up those two positions and moving to a full-time emergency management coordinator position, we'd actually receive additional revenues from the EMPG grant. Right now, you just heard Mark's report at the last board meeting, and he's not able to spend a lot of time on the emergency management stuff. So we don't maximize that grant for his salary. You hear him say it's roughly about 30% of his salary with minimal hours. If we have a full-time emergency management coordinator, then we can bring in additional $13,449 from that grant. And that's above and beyond what we bring in for Mark now. It's a one position grant, so we wouldn't bring in both, but we would bring in roughly 30% of that full-time. So it's about, I think it's about 11,000 we get now for that piece of Mark's position. So that's what that additional EMPG funding would be for. The next revenue item is actually taking revenue off the table, not helping our situation. But I had a really frank conversation with Treasurer Pickens, who confided in me that he felt that the revenues for the dog census that we had built in were a little overstated, quite overstated. We had built in, I believe, 80,000, and we're suggesting to bring that down to 25,000. So we're actually backing out the 55,000 of revenue. I appreciate Treasurer Pickens bringing that up to me. We do strive to be realistic in budgeting. Which leads us to the next revenue item. We talked about this last time we were in finance. We talked about the additional recreational marijuana revenues that are now coming to the county. We talked about there being 5 in our county now. However, when we looked at the point in time, when we looked at how many we felt were in town physically, I should say in the county physically, we felt comfortable saying that we would have 4 total. So that essentially doubles our revenue from that. Originally, we had 2. We figured that there would be 2. I don't think dispensaries is the right word there. I think it's the retail, I feel like retail stores. So from the 2 that we had built in, we're adding 2 more for 4 total. So thank you for that suggestion. That actually came out of finance last time. Revenues, I know we did pour over the fees. We collected fee schedules from all the departments that charge fees. Those fee schedules will be part of the budget document. So it'll be part of what the board approves each year going forward. And we really dove into those to see, is there any room for growth there, right? Every other cost is rising. Why not our fees? Well, what we found through that was really a lot of our fees are set statutorily. We really don't have a lot of wiggle room there. We met with Tim Nieport, Director of Community Development, to really hone in on his fees. It looked like some of them had been a while since we looked at them, but as far as like his inspections fee, his inspection fund, the building fund is doing really well. It's a self-supporting fund. And so really there's no need to raise those costs or to raise those fees. We looked in general fund at zoning fees in particular, but really the end of the day, what came out of that meeting is more that we just need to be cognizant about covering our costs. Mr. Nieport talks about when applications require public hearings and notices, things like that, there is an escrow set up to handle things like that. So maybe doing that more often with other meetings, not just certain types of ones, just to make sure we're covering costs through our fees. So unfortunately, I didn't really see a lot of room to increase fees. But you'll get to see those in the budget document. So at least you can have your eyes on those each year. And if there's any that you want to investigate, we can bring the departments forward for sure. So the rest of the revenues that you see built in are from ARPA. The bottom 2, the Global Essential Pay and the Board of Commissioners Chambers, those 2 came out of the ARPA work group. There are some other projects that they recommended. However, those projects either were getting done in the current year or didn't involve general fund, like the treasurers for foreclosure prevention program. That would be recognized in probably the delinquent tax fund. So that's why you don't see that type of project here. The trial court hearing room upgrade for ARPA, that I believe we think can get done in the current year if the board approves that. So let's see. Sorry, checking. Ashley's in the hospital, everything's happening, baby's coming soon. So my apologies. I'm checking that text that just came through. I'm trying to focus on the ever important budget. Any questions about the revenues that I just talked about building in?
Commissioners, any questions on that? No, I don't have any on those.
Okay, adjustments to expenditures. This just goes back to the emergency management personnel restructure. This 75,000 would be a savings from elimination ultimately of the current part-time planner position and that full-time admin assistant that's shared between 911 and emergency management. This would be the general fund's half of that full-time that had been budgeted. So we would take that out to approve that emergency management coordinator position full-time. What really sold me on that restructure was, I think it's like a total of $5,000 extra that it costs in this restructure to take out those positions we would be eliminating and adding this full time. But in emergency management, it scares me how little time Director Griffiths is able to put towards emergency management in this day and age. But ultimately, I know too that those positions quite often can generate more revenue than we spend on them. Bang for your buck. Mark always says you get about $6 back for every dollar spent in emergency management. Quite frankly, this position would be a grant writer in a lot of ways, probably not necessarily just to pay for themselves in the emergency management function, but maybe a position that can be utilized even more. That grant only pays 30% of their salary, so they can be utilized in other ways for the rest of their, or for some of their time. Again, not choosing to move forward any reclassification personnel requests at this time. But remember, those were built in the original 4.6 million deficit, so those would be coming out. A wage study, again, I'm adding this in and using ARPA revenues just to kind of net it out. Self-funded prescriptions, we've heard from 44 North that there's some big savings on the table with going self-funded for medical and prescriptions. The prescriptions would save about $100,000. I think that's a great way to start. For this comfort of moving back to a self-insured option. That would save us about $100,000. Meeting with 44 North, I believe Thursday morning, to see what the Blue Cross Blue Shield rates come in at for potentially going medical self-insured. But this would just be the prescription piece. And then, of course, building in the expenditure of a global essential premium pay through ARPA and that Board of Commissioners AV upgrade and room 320. So all of that told, not a lot off the mark movement, but we're down to just over $500,000 of deficit to draft 4. So I think I have to stop my share and then reshare to go to the draft that you have in front of you. And so this draft number 4, this is where you'll see this, where we go from the 4.6 and the requested to a $500,000 deficit in the recommended. And it really, I feel like it's my goal to bring you a balanced budget. And we have crawled in and out of this document. We've pushed on revenues, we've pulled on expenditures. We like to budget conservatively so that at this time of the year in the budget, we don't end up with problems that we can't solve or there's not enough time to recover from in the year. Part of why we do our budget amendments now throughout the year. And I sit here and I struggle with how can we be $500,000 upside down, but it kind of makes sense. The forecast that we've been doing, we're okay for a few years and then we fall off. I think part of that is that $8 million ARPA we built into that forecast, right? $8 million interjection that is going to allow us to continue on for a few years. But then even the forecast is proving out that we need an influx of new revenues in our general fund. And then it dawns on me, yep, that everything is proving that out. I'm just gonna go through this, draft 4 expenditures. These general fund departments are only gonna change, like, the bottom line would have the personnel requests taken out now. We would have taken out the self-funded prescriptions from these numbers, added in the Board of Commissioners chambers and whatnot. So the first page is really the most important, and come out at that $500,000 deficit. Our other funds, also using a lot of fund balance. You see the net of revenues over expenditures for parks, for Commission on Aging, for central dispatch, building inspections, and recycling. All using fund balance, but all having fund balance that they're able to rely on for that. Certainly some are projects that are one time, but some are ongoing. We go to the personnel requests. Again, this just tells that story. Anything highlighted in yellow is what is getting approved going forward. We'll start with the general fund, maybe. All of these positions here are reclassification requests, right? Where they're saying currently it's this grade and we want to move to a different grade. Same person, same position. Those are the ones I'm saying should go out to a third party and be put into a classification system that can be justified and proven. The only one that wasn't a reclassification request in general fund is this emergency management coordinator position. Again, the net impact to general fund on that was around $5,000 to $6,000. Once you take out the credits, if you will, for those other positions that we're giving up. Was there a question?
No.
These are the non-general fund personnel requests. Again, you see all of these reclassification requests. Mostly these are at the MRF. So, those will be getting looked at through the feasibility study with maybe some changes happening there. But, so maybe not the best time, but again, I'm just not ready to move forward any reclassification requests right now, but we do have to address them. These central dispatch 911 positions were again that restructuring. This is not to do with emergency management, although that administrative assistant position that is budgeted and was split between emergency management and 911 is being given up, if you will. Also, abandoning the deputy director position. If you remember, Director Griffiths a number of years ago had a deputy who left our employment, and that position has remained unfilled. So basically combining that into these two operations managers. So giving up that deputy director position, giving up that admin assistant position. Again, those are central dispatch fund, not general fund. But more like a restructure rather than a reclassification. Any questions on those? Moving into, this is the general fund capital. Again, the highlights are what is being approved to move forward. The first two lighting retrofits, those were not approved to go forward because we're actually getting those done hopefully in fiscal 22. Boiler replacement, parking lot ceiling at the courthouse, animal control and health department air conditioner replacements are being moved forward, along with sheriff's vehicles, software that is shared between sheriff and PA and the global jail tracker software that the sheriff uses. Those last few, the patrol vehicles, the software, those are paid for out of, as you can see, there's a commissary transfer from Sheriff's Commissary Fund, and also we're asking him to apply for an MMRMA risk avoidance program grant for his global jail tracker. We've talked a little bit about these two capital projects that I'm not moving forward at this time. I talked to you about them because I do think they're both worth mentioning. If the commissioners think it's something worth pursuing these purchases, then you can absolutely choose to use fund balance for it, or we can choose to cut something else. But in drains, they've got an F-150 pickup truck, I believe. I want to say it's a 14-15. It's still got under 50,000 miles on it, so still a lot of value to it. So the theory is if we trade that truck in, we could get a nice trade-in value. We get great deals through my deal, so essentially we don't end up paying all too much for the truck, that we can kind of get on a rotation to where we take advantage of that trade-in value. Or, theoretically, it's a nice truck. It's newer, it's got low miles, so theoretically it should last for several years. So just those two trains of thought, but at this time, I'm not choosing to recommend that going forward. The other capital on this list is for security cameras at the courthouse, county building, sheriff's office. This would be an upgrade to the current system. What we have is still working. However, I understand what we have, we can't get replacement cameras for. So this is something that we will have to look at going forward. Something that we'll have to tie into the new facility for the sheriff. But at this time in making cuts, it just wasn't something critical I felt that we needed right now. I will say, and I feel like I've mentioned this to you before, there's also an MMRMA risk avoidance program grant for a security system for the security cameras, up to $50,000. So that could be a potential to help fund that. Any questions on general fund capital requests?
Commissioners?
The only thing I remember from the MMRMA camera grant, the RAP grant, the $50,000, unless they raised the cap, that was like a one-time lifetime cap. Is that, so are we eligible still for the full 50,000, or have we consumed a part of that for other improvements over the last years?
I will check into that, Commissioner. I do not know if it's a one-time, I can see them doing a cap for, will give you money for security cameras once. But I didn't know about the overall cap, because if there is, then I think sheriff is probably approaching that, but I will reach out to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the information.
Chairman Hope, you have any questions?
I don't.
Nicole, I'm just gonna hold my questions, comments, or whatever to the end. So,
Very good. Very good. We'll move on then to capital improvement requests other than general fund. Essentially, the only thing pulled from this list was a lighting retrofit that we're getting done in the current year. But these funds have the money. Their plans say, this is what this is the projects they should be working on. So as long as there's money and this is what they should be working on, keeps operations going, that's what I'm gonna approve to move forward. So we've got at I don't know, I can go through these. They all seem pretty straightforward, to be honest. Lots of things at the park, but at the Parks and Rec, but that is again in their master plan. These are all projects that they've wanted to get done. They have the funding to do them. We all know the MRF fund isn't performing fantastically, although the high-low is a critical piece of equipment for the operation. So that's something that they're gonna need to replace. The only capital item here at the bottom that got pulled for, this is MIDC, this would be at Public Defender's Office. We had originally put in $25,000 to seal and paint that lot. I think because we had a similar quote on a similar parking lot for that much, but it came in actually under the $5,000, so it wouldn't even be considered capital. So we did pull that. So I'm going to stop my share on that. And are there any questions before I go into some options that we might have that you may or may not find appealing?
Nicole, before you get, well, I don't know if I want to bring up my questions, comments before then or not. Well, you know what? I'm gonna let you go. Tell us your doomsday. I don't want to use that, but your 511-807 issues.
I never have trouble bringing you guys the bad news, do I?
Now, do we have this in front of us? This document here? I do not see the.
You don't, you wouldn't have this. It was too scary to distribute for you guys. We should have, anyway, here it is. I'm just throwing it up there. Revenue options, some things that we could think about. And again, none of these are going to be attractive. If they were, they'd already be built into the recommended budget. But some options for revenue, we've talked a little bit about indirect costs being charged to outside entities. Pretty tough, right? They don't know it's coming. It's certainly a justified charge. Our cost allocation plan is solid, it's vetted, and these are actual costs of doing business. So this would be to the road commission, to the medical care facility, to the transportation commission, and to district health department. And if we charged indirect costs to all of those, it would be over $276,000 annually. I don't know if that would perpetuate. They might find a new fiduciary at that point, and it's political, right? So that's tough. Part of my job, I feel like, is when I know something, I need to tell you. So if you weren't aware, there is an option to levy up to 0.1 mils for Veterans Affairs. Now, this we'd have to work with our Veterans Affairs Committee. 0.1 mil would bring in about 230,000. We wouldn't need 230,000 to fund our Veterans Affairs, so we couldn't do the full 0.1 mil, but we could do up to what the Veterans Affairs Department costs the general fund, which is $141,065. That does not include the $50,000 state grant, right? Obviously, that revenue comes from the state. So if you look at your budget and you say, wait a minute, Veterans Affairs Department is $191,000. That's why that would be different. Delinquent tax revolving fund, we always seem to put that on our revenue options. I think it's clear that we have to work with the treasurer on any ask from that fund, but I think it's also clear that 800,000 or $1 million that we've taken annually historically is too much, and I don't believe that delinquent tax revolving fund can sustain with that large of a transfer every year. So I don't know the amount there. I think we'd have to work with the treasurer to see if there's any room for additional transfer. This last one, PA 88, is actually another one of these things that the Board of Commissioners has the power to levy. Again, this doesn't go to the vote of the people. It's a 0.5 mil you can levy for the promotion of agriculture and economic development. Washtenaw County uses this act to fund Sparks. It's their economic development. It's like their MMDC. Currently, with what we spend for MSU Extension, Middle Michigan Development Corp. Appropriation and our Community Development Office, it's a little over 516,000, close to 517, that could be brought into the general fund. Again, it's like the veterans, we could levy up to that amount, but we wouldn't need that whole amount. 0.5 of a mil would bring in a little over $1.1 million. So, I mean, there's strategy here too, I guess, if that's something that the board has an appetite to levy, again, does not go to the vote of the people. You could look at maybe what you're doing in MSU Extension, what that contract gets us. Do we want more? Look at what we're appropriating to MMDC. What does that get us? Do we want more? So this is what currently is in our budget that could save us. Again, very political. I'm not sure that that is a path forward for this board, but it's definitely an option. So expenditure options, we've got this self-insured medical coverage savings of about $500,000, but that is moving away from Blue Cross. I know that is not the desire of anyone listening to this Zoom right now, I'm sure. But again, it cannot be ignored. We are going to start this insurance committee. We are going to be working with 44 North going forward, get out in front of maybe a change for next year, but it's got to be looked at on the table. There's a $500,000 on the table to walk away from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Further unattractive options are that 2% COLA built into the budget could be backed out. If you went to a 1% cost of living from a 2%, it's going to save you almost $105,000. If you give a 0% from a 2%, that's going to save $200,000, just over $200,000. Again, not that I'm recommending that, otherwise it'd be in the recommended budget, but I want you to understand those numbers of what it costs to afford those things. Even more unattractive, we are 37.5 hours full time, which is a little odd. I don't know if that was done to save money. I presume so at the time, but if we go down to 35 hours as full time, that would save us about $300,000. Now, I caution that is non-union only. And just like the next one, the furlough day option, which is equally unattractive, those are non-union only. And so it does not offer any uniform solution to our ongoing problem. But fund balance is here. That's the last thing on this list. And it's there because likely, unless some of these options look attractive to you and you want me to pursue any of these options, then the budget presentation next Tuesday, the budget document you receive in your packet this Friday will likely have fund balance used to fill that deficit. That is, I'm gonna stop my share.
Okay, is that your presentation?
That is all I have for you this morning, and I will gladly answer any questions that you have.
Commissioners, can start with Commissioner Jelezinski. Commissioner Jelezinski, any questions, comments, concerns, etc.?
The only thing I know that read the media we get from National Association of Counties, get the township information. They're all hitting on the fact government is having a hard time attracting qualified labor and keeping their current labor. And so I think any kind of impact on wages, I think it's good to move ahead with the ARPA's or the class wage study again to look. But if we start falling behind, and I think we're already experiencing in some department critical issues dealing with personnel. I don't think I could support any of that. I think we need to have a COLA. We're living in an inflationary time, and if we don't do that, we're just adding to the issue of the wage study, what they're gonna find. As for coming up with, indirects for some of the, those new departments, some of them we already support through a general fund appropriation. And now if we're taking part of that back, are they just gonna need to ask for more? Is it a catch-22 type of situation? I know the road commission's got a debt now that they're gonna have to pay off over many years to support their facilities, so I don't know how productive that would be to come up with those indirect charges to those, I think there was 4 entities there. It's a tough time, and I know that looking down the road as we look at the jail and having our own indebtedness and having to pay that back, it's not going to get any easier. And the one place that we have is wages and salaries. And if we look at the wage study, I wouldn't be surprised what it's going to find, but we've been making improvements in software. I mean, should we have a hiring freeze until all departments justify their current personnel? There may be some savings there. I don't know that. And probably even with the hiring freeze, openings to get refilled. But I think it makes good sense to take a look at what the responsibilities are, how the impacts of software and has benefited those departments, and is there a way we can realize some savings there? I wouldn't want to be in Administrator Frost's position. It's a tough time, not only this year, but looking down the road.
Thank you. Very good statements. Chairman Hope.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Jelzinski on the cost of living. I don't think we can afford to get behind on wages again. We're gonna have to stay competitive to attract people, and 2% is modest anyway. I don't think that needs to be cut. There weren't any of those expenditure suggestions that were really palatable to me. The 500,000 for self-insurance, if we have to switch from Blue Cross Blue Shield, then I don't think anybody wants to do that. Some of the revenue suggestions, I don't have, if we took a little bit of money from the delinquent tax revolving fund, we don't have to take 800,000 like we have in previous years, but we could take half of that deficit of 511. Certainly that would leave enough money in that account, I would think, to keep that serviceable. And the other things, the PA 88 and the Veterans Affairs, those are both kind of interesting to me. But I don't know if we have time to really pursue those and work those into this upcoming budget.
That's exactly right, Chairman, because you would levy, I think they would be levied in the winter. I think if they were levied in the winter, I think there'd be time, but there's obviously not a lot of front end time of education and communication. But I don't think they'd go on the July tax bill. I think they'd go on the December. So I think you could still get that this year, but it'd be pretty quick.
Yeah. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Very well stated. I kind of echo, I'm going to say that what Commissioner Jelzinski Chairman Hope stated, I don't disagree with any of their statements by any means. I just have a couple, not more than a couple, just a couple statements and comments and concerns as this moves forward. Nicole, you mentioned the term influx of new revenue. I think that was a term that you used. I think that got parentheses around. I circled the word influx, or bringing in or changing. In that whole statement, you know, you can reword it, wordsmith it, however you want to say it. But that's a very true statement. Is revenue can be attained. That when I say revenue, that's not necessarily the best term in the world to use, but dollars. Yeah. Let's look, for instance, department spending. I'm going to focus on the 511-807. Okay. Department spending, I think you're probably budgeting right now at 100% department spend. Is that correct? You know, I mean, every quarter we look at a snapshot to kind of see where we're at on department spend. I think this year, I think departments are going to hit probably in the 90s, 90, which means out of 100%, they're going to spend 90% of that. So there'll be a 10% spend savings involved, I think. So, I mean, some of that's going to reduce that 511-807. I think I'd like to see a historic, or maybe not before the budget, but in my anticipation, I think that historically you've come in under 100% in the departments. So I think when you budget that dollar amount, there's some conservatism set into that, where you can probably in your head go, well, we're budgeting this, but we know we're going to hit about 90% of that. So out of that 511, you know, I think that's a comfortable in my head, that's going to be reduced just off the top right there. Another thing that's always been a concern of mine not a concern, a feeling of mine over the years, and this is not only on this board, but other boards that I've served on, is with the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe 2% funding. It's always been a feeling of mine that when I see requests, and I probably won't be able to readily turn to it, but when I see dollar amounts coming out of the general fund, let's say, for instance, dollar amounts for, and we don't want to coordinate because that's an ongoing thing. Boiler replacements, sealed parking lots, air unit replacements, they're coming out of the general fund as one-time hits. Okay. My feeling and what I've seen over the years is the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe on the 2% request like to do one-time hits. They don't necessarily like to fund or get involved in this, I guess, the seeding of something that's going to continue on, not necessarily with their dollars, but something else. Why then, when we request 2% requests, are not these used for roadmaps? So we can pull back from our general fund out. Maybe they are. I just have not readily seen it. Which could be, I mean, if facilities, if Isabella County asks for our facilities, we need, let's see, I'm going to do quick math, 38, 53, $70,000 right there in the highlighted in yellow. Why could not we request to the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe? Yes, we got it in our budget, we got it. But if we request it, they provide it, then we can pull it out and take away from our deficit. Is that being done? And if not, why should not we look at that, since we're looking for ways to decrease our budget deficit? We know this is going to be a source of, as you said, funding in the future. Okay. Why aren't we, maybe we're doing it, but I don't see it, I don't think readily off the top of my head every time. Why aren't we usually doing this and planning our 2% requests in a different way?
I think that some department heads and electeds do a really good job of it. And I know, like, specifically sheriff, when he'll ask for 2% funding for something, he might specifically not ask for it on a capital request from the general fund. So I think there's been more of we ask for the tribe for things that we could live without, because we don't want to risk funding, the funding of things we have to live with, I suppose. But Sheriff does a great job of that. Trial court does a great job of that. They write 2% grants to cover their drug testing supplies, which would have to come out of general fund, if they weren't funded by Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe. Obviously, Commission on Aging and Parks and Rec do a great job. The MRF does, but those aren't so much tied to general fund. MRF is, because obviously general fund would have to supplement if the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe didn't. But as you talk about this, Chairman Horton, I feel like facilities doesn't, facilities is one that traditionally has not gone for any 2% grants. And that's just a function of, it just hasn't happened traditionally in the past. It's been those other departments are elected. So I think we absolutely could apply this fall for Saginaw Chippewa grant dollars for those projects.
Well, this looking also too is that the board approves these. We said every year we rank our opinions of these. And in theory, the board is in charge of the requests.
Mhm,
So it's
absolutely.
like the different departments and saying, oh, we're waiting for the department head or the sheriff or to do this. The board itself could take it upon themselves to sit there and say, well, we've allocated in our budget $70,000 towards facilities. We should make that a focus of our 2% request to try to see if we can't, since we're in deficit spending, why are we not looking at that as a possible way to reduce our budget deficit instead of funding it with what is it called? Not
Fund balance.
fund balance. Thank you. Our unfunded fund balance dollars. I think that to me is more fiscally sound, because again, if you don't get it, that's fine because you budgeted for it. Okay. But if you do get it, then you can reduce your budget deficit because we're in deficit spending. And that is never a good situation to be in, is when you're in deficit spending. Again, it's all hypothetical. I know we have to put a balanced budget out there, but that to me just makes sense as far as using your funding requests in a probably a more fiscally sound way. That's just my opinion. I talked about fund balance. Kind of gonna go through turbine dollars. My understanding is where you are using the turbine dollars in this budget, correct?
Yes, they are built into this budget. However, the board can commit those dollars to the sheriff's office and correctional facility project if you choose to.
That would just then increase our budget deficit, correct?
Nope, your budget deficit would remain the same. It would decrease your unassigned fund balance.
Okay. Okay, my concern, if we spend any money outside of not saving it, but budgeting for the future expenses with the jail project, the money that we're spending this year is going to have to be replaced in future years from other revenue sources. So you're kind of jumping off the cliff by using those dollars, for lack of a better term, because you got to make those up.
Yes, sir. That's that influx of new revenues. Yes, sir.
So
Which
that-
the turbines were, right? Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
it would be very, very nice as a community standpoint or from a budgeting standpoint to not have to spend those turbine dollars on the jail project. I think that would make everyone's job, committees, a lot easier. But unfortunately, that is not in our plan, especially in our 10-year forecast that we've looked at. So I am very concerned with using any turbine dollars on any part of covering, adding to our general revenue this year, because the fact that money has to be replaced this year and going forward in the future, every single year, that dollar amount's got to be accounted for. And it looks good on paper year one, but year two, it just blows off. So I'm very concerned with that dollar amount. The COLA percentage, I do agree that we have to stay competitive. Okay. The problem, and again, I'm not saying for this year, but that's a good number to have if you're budgeting in our 10-year forecast. If we're budgeting a 2% COLA increase every year, was that in our 10-year forecast?
Yes, I believe 2 or 2.5.
And doing that, if you, let's say, for instance, everything goes fine this year. But sooner or later, you're gonna have to look at that, because every time you do a COLA increase, that's another expense that just doesn't happen in the year it happens, and it continues on to, as Buzz Lightyear says, to infinity and beyond, okay? It goes on every year. So if you save, I'm gonna throw out $200,000 this year, again, I'm just as an example, not as what I would encourage doing this year, because we're in a competitive market, could very well be for the next X amount of years. But if you say you reduce from COLA expenditures, you reduce $200,000, okay, this year, that's a dollar amount that's not gonna appear in future budgets. So in simple math, and again, this is me looking at it just very simply, if you take $200,000 out, let's say this year as an example, in year 10, you're saved yourself $2 million by not having that one-time hit carry on. Times that by 4, you're at now, man, I lost my train of thought. You're at now at $8 million. And I know we have a large budget expense coming up with the correctional facility and the jail and the that in the sheriff's department. So that is the one way I can look at a long-term plan, is that's going to have to be looked at. Again, you're in a competitive market, but you talked about how you can save money, and if you can stop carrying on these to infinity and beyond expenses, that's an easy source. Again, not encouraging it this year, but it's sooner or later it's going to have to be looked at. Same thing with Blue Cross Blue Shield. I agree with Chairman Hope's statement that is the standard by which all insurance companies, everyone's used to in the state of Michigan. Okay. I would look at very strongly at possibly going self-funded on that. I don't know if I would take it to the extreme portion of dropping Blue Cross Blue Shield as the carrier, but certainly from a self-funding component, that's another thing that not only saves you in year 1, but could potentially save you down the road. So again, I would highly encourage this board and this committee in future endeavors and future meetings to focus in on that, make that a focus, because that's a revenue source that should be looked at. So let's see, self-insurance I talked about. Again, everything to me is the new tax dollar amount. We had talked about the 2 levies. Okay. Okay, you probably can do the numbers on that. And that might get you some of the payments. And again, if that was forecasted into the 10-year plan, that would be interesting to see where that would be at. Okay, those dollar amounts. We had talked about, not in this budget, but we have had discussions in this committee and other groups. And I have stated I think the last board meeting, I hinted all around it, didn't go there. But in regards to public safety or some similar type of millage in regards to that, I think all that's all said and well, and you can budget that. But I think the everything you've talked about in your getting rid of the 511-807 should serve as a roadmap going in the future. Look at that as your 10-year influx of new revenue plan, for lack of a better term. They're all very good comments, suggestions, some way more painful than others. Some I would not encourage, such as, yes, other places go as a different fiduciary or different revenue sources and things like that. But there are other things that you want to try to avoid in running a business. I think you want to, you don't want to harm, and I'm going to use pharmacy terms because that's what I can speak to. You don't want to do anything that harms your patients. So you don't want to take away your services and your aspects of your service. So how can you reduce costs and everything without taking away from your patients? As Commissioner Jelazinski said, one of the ways you look at is with employees' expense, wages and benefits. However, you can't, that's a fine balance, and it's because if you don't have the proper employees in place, your patients or your customers are going to suffer also. So that's always a fine balancing line. How do you how do you reconcile all that? And that's probably below our pay scale here, the three of us sitting here. And that's for someone like yourself to weigh in. And it's a great thing, I think, that you have the 10-year plan. And everything that we're discussing, we're kind of building. This is not new to this committee or not new to the Board of Commissioners, but the way it's presented is in a very business-like setting or mindset. And that's wonderful to see. I mean, I encourage that. Again, I'm here for 3 more months, and as a taxpayer in the future, this is what I want to see. This is what I want to see counties do, is plan for revenue, not snapshot in time. Okay, how do we manage? How do we budget? And then we forget about it until we go, oh crap, or something like that in the future. Okay. So yeah, I think everything you've done here is wonderful. I commend you. I can live with this 511,807 because I know it's not going to be there. Okay, I personally think it's going to be lower this year. I don't think this year is going to be our issue with funding. It really isn't. But in the future, it's definitely going to be. And by year, what was it, year 6 or 7 from here, it could really be an issue. So I think everything you stated is great. I think that's your roadmap, that's your plan. Tweak it. Who knew that we would get ARP dollars like we did? Okay, God, hope we don't get them. The reason I've got them again, hopefully I never have to deal with that again. But, there's grants out there that could be done. There's other things that could be had. So there's your new revenue that we haven't discussed it. How can we do about better job, not better job? Encourage more grant writing. I think dollars are out there. Again, things could be falling off too. I know this year we're looking at additional recreational marijuana revenues. I don't think that dollar amount, it may continue on for the next year or two. I see that dropping. I see that either going to be spent for something else. I see capitalism taking over, and you can go, I'll give Big Rapids as an example, 16 down to 4, probably real quickly if they're not meeting their goals. I mean, it's easy to open up a business and start, but maintaining after a certain time frame, who knows? So again, I'm comfortable in the fact, I know I should say it like that. I'm not comfortable in the fact that we're 511,807. I like to see us positive in a significant number. Okay. But that number right there, I know, given what my experience has been on the board, that number will probably be reduced. And just because of department heads and our employees buying into the fact that they have a stake in this too. And so, I think going forward, good luck. This is the last budget I get to work on. Other than being the guy up in the Muppets, in the suite up in the Muppets, everybody else down there, what they're doing. But I think it's a very, very good roadmap, and let's continue on doing this and really working at it. And, Chairman Hope, I'm sure I'm not going to speak for next year for him, but, and this board, I know these 2 commissioners across from me are definitely going to be on the board for next year. So I'll have their ear for the next 3.5 months or so. And I think this is where you've got to go. So I'm going to be in support of this. If you can tweak that number down, great. I'm comfortable with it. I was not comfortable with 4 something, but I knew that would drop. But the county is going to have to really continue on in this. And actually, it's funny because my blue pen broke as I was sitting here today, and I don't know if that's an ominous sign or a bad or a good sign.
No money in the budget to replace it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So I borrowed from Michelle.
Bring your
So
own
there you go.
pens.
I borrowed from Michelle. So, but yeah, again, thank you for doing this. I know you and your staff, and I look at the people around me, all the time and effort that goes into a budget. And this being your first, that's got your signature on it. Okay. It's a very, very well thought out and drafted that budget. So thank you for that.
Well, and we're not done. Melissa and I met with MERS just yesterday. I think I had told you that we were working with a new tool that MERS put out to kind of a forecasting tool, to play some what if scenarios. So we've really been looking at, we've talked about, we need $8 million of ARPA revenue towards the correctional facility project. But we've been looking at what if that 8 million is applied to our pension system? And again, I know you can't use the ARPA dollars to send to your pension system, but we can recognize those ARPA dollars on public safety payroll, on, you know, different things that are in the general fund budget. We bring those revenues into our balance sheet, if you will, into our fund balance. Once we recognize them on a legitimate use, then they're ours to spend on anything we want. So that caveat of you can't spend ARPA dollars on a correctional facility, you can't send them to the pension. Exactly, you can't directly do that. But once we get them in our coffers, if you will, we can choose to do that. The MERS tool only goes out to 2027, so it really has some limitations on what it does. But when we plug in $8 million towards our unfunded accrued liability, starting in 2024, 25, 26, 27, we saw anywhere from $1 million to $1.7 million, our payment lowering with MERS, right? Beyond that, that's going to continue for a while. So the tool didn't show us what it would look like out in the future, but we've ordered from MERS a report that will show us that, because if we can move that $8 million to MERS, it might save up. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to guess at a number, but over those 4 years, it was over $5.5 million that it would save. So if that perpetuates out in the future, basically we're just trying to figure out, where does it make sense to put the money? Where's the most bang for the buck, right? Because if we send $8 million to USDA loan, we're going to pay off $8 million a loan. If we send it to MERS, we might pay off 15 million of unfunded liability over time, right? You know, or save up 15 million of payments over time. So we really are looking at some options for being outside fiduciary to an organization, because I realize charging indirect costs to the road commission, to the health department, just doesn't feel right. I get that. So we are searching, you know, for some other outside entities that actually want us to charge them for those services. I was in a meeting recently of the local sustainability group where a representative of DTE was there, and they swear they're building solar soon. So those revenues, you know, like the turbine revenues that were an influx of new revenues that we were lucky to get, it does look like there is some solar coming. And then of course, you know, we've got USDA Marshall's revenue once the correctional facility is built. USDA tells us, Sheriff tells us, we believe those revenues are, you know, going to increase. So a lot of things to build into that forecast yet.
All right, you mentioned the $8 million. I mean, just looking at it, and then again, 2.125% is our loan from USDA percentage, versus if you take that $8 million and put it into the MERS, and you can capture, what is there, 7 point something?
7.35
So
ROI.
they're 5% plus, just 5% on $8 million. Commissioner Jelazinski's already got that number in his head, what that is. So, I mean, that's the way you think in business. That's why you have to think now, and that's why you need to think is, we're all community based, and that's why you got to think for our community. What is the best for our community dollars? Do that, and I think, again, outside my pay scale in regards to managing that. Thank you for doing that or looking into that. But that's how you got to look at it now. You have to look at not 1 year, you know, set it and forget it type situation, or take a picture and say we're going to manage this, and then, you know, that's how you have to look at it. And you know, over the years, you know, this board has, while we've tried to do that in our heads, we've necessarily always haven't done that. And I think this is a good way to do it, and it's a great way going forward. So thank you. So
Feels right. Thank you.
Commissioner Jelazinski.
I kind of agree with, not kind of, but I do agree with Committee Chair Horton about the $500,000. I know we have good, talented department heads, elected officials, and that will be whittled down. So we won't have that total impact. It may totally go away. But as we were talking about the 2% money, something popped into my mind, you know, since I was a 13-year employee in this county, left in 98. So this is like 23 or so years. So things probably changed, but back then, on this 2% money, I think the county used to get a payment in lieu of taxes. Now, there may have been some agreement with the county board that changed that, because I don't see that any longer in the monies that are dispersed. But I do know it still occurs with Chippewa Township. They just get a general dollar amount. And I suspect that's in lieu of taxes. And I think there's one or two other townships. That might be one way to get some benefit out of the 2%. And then the tribe disperses the rest through projects that are requested.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's probably not going to be a big dollar amount, but it'd be something.
Agreed, agreed. I can definitely look into that, sir. Mhm.
Commissioners, anything else on this topic?
I'll just say, all good comments from my fellow commissioners here. I mentioned using part of the DTRF, but I think, in my opinion, we could forego that for now this year. And I can support what you presented here.
And
I feel pretty good
I
about
agree with that. I think as a, I don't want to use the term compromise, because that would say that we're not working together as, well, actually, we would be working as a team. But that dollar amount is a readily identifiable number. Again, there could be different viewpoints on what that number is, or could be,
Mhm.
but I think that's something that, you know, you can pull if there's excess there in the in the delinquent tax revolving fund, you can always pull that. Bring that in as your additional revenue, and, you know, and thank the treasurer for doing a good job tracking that, keeping up with that. At the same time, there could be a time when the board has to pony up and put more into that. You just don't know. And being conservative on this now is probably the better way to go, especially with some unknowns, and especially with some unknowns in our community with feeling the effects of the COVID era.
Yeah.
So there's always those issues. So I agree. I think being conservative with that fund for a while, and you can always see at the very end what's left and everything. So, you know, again, though, you look at how long is that opioid settlement revenue? How long is that good for? How many years is it?
18 or 19 years, I think.
Okay, so that's just not a one-time hit. Again, that's gonna have to be accounted for year 19, but year
Mhm.
19, I'll be like a grandfather, maybe have my great grandfather, so who knows? Not should be. But there you go. So, okay, anything else, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Nicole. That was a very good presentation. I do appreciate that very much.
Good.
Next up, invoice list discussion. Commissioners, anything to add on this, or some comments, suggest anything?
The only question I have on the July 29th, the last two entries, the Chippewa Township and Union Township, 2022 set. I'm not sure exactly what that's for. Looks like $2.50 parcel, and then multiplied by the number of parcels.
Oh, sure. So that the set is the state education tax. And I believe it's the let's see, 2022 set state education tax. So the state pays the townships $2.50 a parcel, I'm sorry, to levy the state education tax on the summer tax bills. Because townships levy in the winter, so townships wouldn't need to send out a tax bill in the summer, except they gotta charge that dang state education tax. So the state basically says, well, we'll pay you to do that so that we don't have to do it. So it's $2.50 per parcel to levy that, to send out that tax bill for the state education tax.
Appreciate the explanation.
Mhm. Mhm.
Commissioners, anything else?
Oh, that was my question. That's those two entries. So
Okay. I have nothing else on that, so that will end the invoice list discussion. Announcements, commissioners, any announcements?
I did see that, I haven't really read it in detail, but the MAC annual conference registration is open, so. And I don't know the exact dates, sometime in
It's
September.
in Port Huron this year, I
It's
understand.
in Port Huron. Yep.
Okay. I have no announcements except for, my understanding, because I did not schedule it and I'm not going to be here. We do not have a meeting this afternoon. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, good, because I did not have that in my calendar and I wasn't going to be here. So very good.
Unless you'd like to come hang out in the motorhome.
No, that, nope.
Hey, this is 1990. 92, 30 years old this year. So she's vintage.
Oh, there you go. You just say vintage. That's what, vintage, it's like the Goodwills, the G will and the Habitat for Humanities, the have. That's kind of how I just know it. All right, so, okay, I have no announcements. I'm gonna call to the public now, turn to my. Most public has left because I bored them to death, so they've all gone. Anything on the virtual? Okay, no one's, it's been a lovely meeting, but with that at 11:15, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. Got out of here at 11:15. That's not bad. I know. Shh.